Welcome everyone. I hope that you've had a great third day of the national conference. I'm going to be kicking us off. I'm here. This is the coffee activity. I'm here with Jesse, Timothy, and Joanne, who are going to be presenting today. Please feel free to use the chat box for any questions, any comments that you have. It's located at the bottom of the Zoom screen. I'll be monitoring that and can help catch the eye of the presenter or you could just turn on your microphone and ask the question directly. So please feel free to use either option. I'm going to be handing it off to Jesse, who's going to be giving the first introduction. So Jesse, welcome.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Jesse Iniguez, and I am the co-founder of Back of the Arts Coffee. We're a Latinx owned, women-owned as well, coffee company that's based out of the south side of Chicago. The reason why I got into coffee originally was because there just wasn't any good coffee in our neighborhood. There wasn't any coffee shops. In fact, the first time I walked into a coffee shop was my freshman year of college. And I remember thinking, why don't we have something like this in my neighborhood, right? That was in 1999, so a little over 20 years ago. And since then, there still was nothing in our neighborhood. And our neighborhood is also an area that's void of safe spaces where young people can gather. And to me, in college, that's what the coffee shop was. It was a place where I can go, write my paper, read, meet with people, come up with ideas. So that's something that I wanted to bring to Back of the Yards. Since then, I was off and on in the coffee industry in Chicago, and in 4 years ago, in 2016, we decided to found Back of the Arts Coffee Company with my partner Myra Hernandez, and we're both from the community. But we wanted to do something different. We didn't just want to do a coffee company. There's 38 other coffee roasters in Chicago that many of them are doing a very, very good job with roasting. But we felt that we had a niche. One was that we're Latinx owned, and we found that there's not that many of us in the country, right? There's not a lot of coffee roasters or coffee companies in general that are Latinx owned and women owned. And so we wanted to do, we wanted to make sure that the products that we offered displayed our culture and the flavors from our culture. The other thing, and I'll show you a quick video right now that we do differently, is what we call our seed model. Seed, I'm not sure if many of you are familiar, but coffee beans are actually not beans, they're seeds, right? And so the reason why we came up with that acronym SEED was not only because to show that coffee beans are seeds actually, but also to signify what we represent and to make sure that everything that we do is based on those 4 pillars, which stands for social impact, economic development, environmental responsibility, and direct relationships. So everything that we do somehow or another touches on that. So I won't go too much into detail. I'll show you guys the video, and then I'll give you more information once it's done.
Back of the Yards is a community in the south side of Chicago that has been systematically underdeveloped. We have a severe unemployment rate amongst youth between the ages of 16 to 24, and consequently, we have issues of gang violence.
It's extremely important for us to make sure that we hire locally and that we offer opportunities to the youth in our neighborhoods to try to improve the community as a whole.
We open our doors to illustrate how small businesses can directly impact a neighborhood's revitalization. Proceeds from every bag sold go to programs that promote peace and education in Back of the Yards.
I started off as stamping bags, they started noticing me that I was doing good, and they promoted me to do more coffee stuff, and that's when I started getting the hang of it and doing it.
The mission that Jesse and Maida have started here back at the Arts is make people be proud of this community. I see it in the younger generations, and I think that's very important for our community to progress, for people to stay, and for people to invest.
We wanted to make sure that we did the most that we could do to protect our environment. We set up our composting bin and a recycling bin in the coffee house. We actually use all compostable materials, including our cups, our utensils, and even our coffee bags. By doing that, we're able to divert about 95% of our waste from the landfill.
We work with a farming community in Chiapas, Mexico. This allows us to source our coffee directly and pay better than fair trade wages. We want to expand this community-based business model in order to invest in other neighborhoods, create new jobs, and expand our direct sourcing model with other coffee farming communities.
So that's a little bit of a presentation of our story and about our seed model. And just to expand a little bit more on that, what we do is how we use the seed model. Can you hear me? I don't know if I can.
Hello, everybody. So hopefully.
If you all could just mute yourselves,
Yeah.
please, that'll be great.
So we should be good, I think. Hello, hello, hello. Few of you guys are here. I hope.
Yeah.
Don't talk to yourself. I often do that.
So
Um,
yeah, I
so
think we have
just
someone.
gonna give this a couple of seconds.
Yeah, I think you can just try to speak over them. It seems like everyone is muted, but I'm not sure.
So we're just 6 o'clock. Hi, somebody.
Okay, I think that's. Yeah, I think I figured out what the issue was. Let me get out of here real second. All right. Okay. Now can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
So as I was saying, sorry about that. So one of the things that we do that's really important for us is hiring local, and so we have a program that we work with a neighborhood nonprofit where we bring in interns, paid interns. We train them for 6 months and get them to become coffee professionals. Not just baristas, but we want them to learn the history, the culture, and the science behind coffee. We want to bring more people of color into the coffee industry. And so one of the things that's one way to do it, right? And so as you saw in the video, they start, as doing something as simple as stamping bags, and and then they become our roasters or our salespeople and that sort of things. And we want them not only to grow with us, but if they find other opportunities with other coffee companies, so that we can provide coffee professionals for the industry as well. And this year, as everyone I'm sure knows, has been difficult for everyone. The beginning of this pandemic, when the schools closed, there's a school right across the street from our coffee shop, and we lost about 75% of our revenue. Same with all the other coffee shops and restaurants that were hurting. We essentially much of our wholesale was just pretty much was shut down for a while. Thankfully, we're starting to pick up again. Our online sales is something that has come up again. And that's again thanks to the support of the community, people like you who support small businesses like ours. So thank you for that, and I hope that we can continue to serve you and provide good quality coffee. I know in the video I mentioned that we work with a small farming community in Chiapas, Mexico, but we work with other farming communities as well. And directly, and those that we don't work directly yet, we're in the process of doing that. We want to make sure that that we do a couple of things. One is that we have the direct relationship with the farmers. We know who those farmers are, so that we can tell their stories. That we also then have that responsibility of making sure that we're paying fair prices above fair trade. And also it helps us ensure quality control from bean to cup. And so that's one of the cool things that one of the perks of the job is that I get to visit some of these farms. The coffee that we're highlighting today is our 47th Street blend, which is our signature blend. When we started this company, we knew there was not a lot of specialty coffee shops in our area. And so we knew we had to introduce our community to good quality coffee, but starting with something that tasted familiar, right? And so our 47th Street blend is a Brazilian and Ethiopian blend. The Brazilian is a base that's very familiar in most coffees. In fact, Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks use it in their blends. And so it's a coffee that's very familiar. It's a very familiar tasting. So for someone who isn't used to a light roast, Ethiopian or Costa Rican coffee, that this is a good way to introduce them. But then we added the Ethiopian to give that little flavor at the end that is unique, that tastes delicious, but doesn't throw them off. It still tastes like the coffee that they're used to, but there's something there that's different. The other thing is it's a medium blend, so it's a good everyday coffee. In fact, this is what I'm drinking right now. I'm still drinking our 47th Street blend. Let me take a sip. And it's a good coffee. It has the dark chocolate and nutty flavors of the Brazilian with the floral and fruity notes of the Ethiopian. So it's a good coffee to introduce folks into what we call the specialty coffee world. But it is a very delicious coffee. It's a coffee that I drink on a daily basis. I do like my lighter roasts, and I like to try different wild flavors. Like my colleagues were talking about earlier. But what I drink every day is a good medium, and our 47th Street blend, I think, hits that spot for us.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Jesse.
just one last thing. Just check out our website, Back of the Arts Coffee. If you have any questions, feel free. I'll be here after my colleagues also present as well.
Yes, and we can share websites and any additional information as well in the chat. I'm going to introduce Timothy. We heard from Massachusetts, from Springfield. Welcome, Tim.
That's right. Thank you for having me. I hope you guys can hear me okay. I'm a little further away from my computer. But welcome. Here we are at Monsoon Roastery in Springfield, Mass. This is where I spend most of my days, is right in front of this mural, roasting coffee right here and packing it up over here. We usually work with a crew of like 3 people in here. But yeah, that's where we are. My name is Tim. I'm the co-owner and founder of Monsoon Roastery and the head roaster here. We started back in 2018. Well, technically we started before that. Monsoon Roastery came about as a dream that my wife and I had shortly after getting married. We were in our college programs trying to finish up our degrees, and we found out we were pregnant, and we didn't know what to do with our lives. And I had jumped in and out of the restaurant industry. I'd helped start a couple different coffee shops in some urban areas, and jumped out of it. It was like, I got to make some money. I'm going to have a kid. Realized like, yeah, making a lot of money is really not that great if it sucks the life out of your soul. And so I turned to my wife one day, probably about 3 months before we were going to have our kid. And I said, I'm really just tired of working for other people's dreams every day. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to find a way to live for ourselves. And about, I don't know, that was in 2014. So 4 years later, Monsoon Roastery was birthed here. We're closing on our 3rd fiscal year, which is cool. And it's been a crazy ride along the way. I got into coffee back right after high school. Somebody handed me a Chemex, which is a glass coffee maker right here. Pretty sleek. If you haven't seen them before, you can check them out. And I started realizing that there's more to coffee than just cream and sugar. And so I dove down the rabbit hole. Like I said, I got involved with a couple coffee shops. I went into doing a startup and jumped in and out. Finally, I got to the place where I was like, well, maybe I can roast my own coffee at home, because it seems like I can get these like $15 coffees for, I don't know, $5 and then just spend a little labor. And so I used to roast on a little popcorn popper outside of our little apartment. And I'd make coffee and I'd bring it in. I'd be like, look how cool this is. And then we try it and go, look how bad this tastes. And so, like I said, 4 years, a lot of people that tried a lot of bad coffee from me, a lot of textbooks, a lot of research and development, and trying to figure out what I was doing, brought me to where I am right now, which is in this awesome production room where I get to make coffee every day for people in our community. And that's really what Monsoon Roastery is focused on, is the Springfield, Mass area. When we started roasting coffee here, there was not a single roaster within 20 miles. There still is not a single roaster within 20 miles of us. We live in the 3rd largest city in the state, so it's a little crazy that we could come in and kind of have an untapped market, especially considering we're in the land of the birthplace, especially coffee. You know, like Scott Rao started his business about 40 minutes from here. Which, if anybody is into specialty coffee, they probably know that guy's name. If you don't know his name, you probably want to, because he's kind of like, he's the godfather of specialty coffee. Like, kudos to him, because he made it all happen for people like me. And yeah, so we're here, we're serving the community because there's nobody here that has coffee for just local people. You don't have any options. And so we decided that we needed to make it happen. When we opened up in 2018, we had a roasting space on the 3rd floor of a warehouse building downtown. And it was in a spot that not many people actually wanted to go. It was away from the attractions of the city. It was away from where even sometimes the police wanted to be. It was maybe a little sketchy for some people. But it was a place where we could produce, and it was cheap. And you know, it was a place that we could get our foothold down. And one thing we found when we started was that people didn't want to come see us. One, because we weren't a coffee shop, we just roasted coffee. But 2, because we weren't in a great area and it was too inconvenient. So what we did is we kind of like got open, we started selling a little bit of coffee, and then we brought the coffee to everybody else. So we did our farmers markets 5 days a week, and we got our website going, and we started this local delivery program. Which, looking back from this year now, really saved our butt and almost made our entire company this year. So what we ended up doing is saying, well, if you won't come to us, if you get coffee through our website, I'll get it to you at your door within 2 days. And so all of a sudden it started picking up, because somebody would order coffee online, and then later in the afternoon I'd drop it at the door. And in 2018, there just was not a lot of local businesses or small businesses that were willing to put in that kind of legwork. And it gave us the upper hand to put people into coffee's houses, which we realized was just our market. So rather than trying to get people to come out and have a cup of coffee here, it was a lot easier for us to just bring it right to people. And it kind of structured the model of the way we do business. So instead of trying to make it inconvenient and making it something you have to come to, we brought it right to you. And so, you know, it was pretty clutch this year when COVID happened. You know, we have an espresso bar that people can visit here. We have made it COVID friendly. You know, we used to have seating in here and in the bar as well, but now it's a walk-up window that people come to outside. And, you know, we tried to make it the best experience possible. And we have a lot of faithful customers. It's really cool. But what saved us this year, when everything got crazy in March, we shut down our retail doors along with most other food producers here in Mass. And it looked really bleak. And then all of a sudden, you know, we got the right hit of putting out a video where we're saying, hey, we're delivering coffee still. And it took off, and people put it on the news, and people shared it on Facebook. And all of a sudden, our sales doubled month to month. and we've seen that hold steady pretty much since March, which has been insane. So where most people have had a huge burden, I know there's a lot of people that have had a crazy burden or are taking incredible hits with their businesses. COVID for us had us pivot into a model that doubled our business, just by having the logistics set up to be able to get coffee over to people. And so that's kind of what we're focused on now. We have our espresso bar. It's still walk up. We do curbside, but what we're really focused on is delivery and getting good coffee to good people in our community. And yeah, that's kind of what we're about. Today, I have loaded up in my Chemex right now, actually a little bit of decaf because I'm caffeine sensitive. I didn't used to be, and then I stopped drinking so much coffee, and it really messes with me now. So at the end of the day, I brew up my decaf, which is called Sweet Spot. It's from Colombia. I know a lot of people don't like decaf, but this is the only decaf I've found in the world that doesn't taste like decaf. It's an ethyl acetate process decaf in Colombia, which sounds really scary. But all ethyl acetate is a derivative from fermented sugar cane. And what that does is help pull out the caffeine a little bit faster when they're processing it without having to use the really nasty stuff or pulling out the flavor with just water. So this allows it to be done with less washes, and it tastes like a phenomenal decaf. It's really great. My signature roast that we probably pumped in the email, I can't remember, would be our Liquid Sunshine. It's a light roast that we do from Zambia right now. It's on the brighter side, but it's an absolutely wonderful coffee if you're looking to get into some of the brighter and sweeter, more berry kind of tasting things in specialty coffee. And yeah, I'm just gonna keep brewing a little bit of coffee right here. I don't know if anybody has questions. I saw some stuff on the chat. I couldn't quite read. Order coffee, haven't received it yet. Oh, that's a bummer. Send me an email. I'll make sure it gets right to you. And if it hasn't, I'm trying to see who it is. All right, I'm gonna look at your name after this, and I'm gonna see where your order's at. We'll make sure.
Tim, you're gonna send us your website. Put your website in the chat.
Okay, yeah. So you guys can go take a look at monsoonroastery.com, or you can find us on Instagram or Facebook. You might see me up there dressed kind of crazy for a number of different things. We try to do kind of silly videos. It just kind of makes the mood lighter. It's something we found in COVID, keeps people more connected with us, is just to be real and be silly. And yeah, that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
Nothing's too serious here. You know, we all got to have some fun.
Oh, yes.
Any other questions?
Hey, Tim, I don't know, man. Jesse, the Chicago coffee pretty tough now.
Oh my gosh. You know what? You know what I love about coffee is that even if, let's say Jesse and I had the same coffee, because of our influences of how we've learned how to roast and the equipment we roast on, we can take the same coffee and have it taste completely different. And it's such a beautiful thing. It's so cool because, you know, coffee farmers spend the majority of the year, I think it's about 10 months growing and another month or two processing. And so by the time I get the coffee, it's already been worked over for about a year by a lot of people that have a lot of love and labor. And so for me, I feel like my job is to represent that hard work and labor from the coffee farmer as best as I can in the 10 to 14 minutes I might spend roasting up each batch of coffee. You know, so I got to take a year's worth of love and then compact that down into about 15 minutes. And it's cool. It's cool. I'm sure everybody else, you know, Jesse and Joanna, I'm sure you can agree.
Yeah, and I want to echo your statement too, Tim. And so we on the decaf, I'm glad that you said that because a lot of people in coffee, you know, shun on decaf. But as you know, it's just getting a good decaf is so much harder. And so we, you know, and same, we use the same Colombian coffee, the same method, you know, that you guys use, and I'm sure it'll taste different and if we use even the same coffee. But usually, same thing. I drink a lot of coffee sometimes in the afternoon. You know, we need a decaf. I drink coffee for the flavor, not for the high. Right. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, and I want to just echo that statement. Yeah.
Heck yeah. And if there's anybody that needs a lot of caffeine, we also do a coffee we call Overtime. It's kind of like a Death Wish coffee. It's a high grade Robusta coffee that'll send you freaking flying. It's got I think it's got double the caffeine of a regular Arabica coffee. And it's a really fun experience just to try if you've never tried it, because Robusta is one of the it's like it's one of the parents species of the Arabica coffee, I think. You can check me on that. But it tastes totally different to your normal coffee. It's a lot less floral, a lot less fruity. If it's done right, it'll be really sweet and a good bit savory. And done wrong, it's absolutely, it tastes like rubbish. Yeah, that is me. Thank you for spending a couple minutes here at Monsoon Roastery with me. I hope I didn't take up too much of the time. And yeah, I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Tim. The website to Monsoon Roastery is in the chat. Next, I want to introduce Joanne. She will take us to 6, and hopefully people can stay on a little bit later if they have any questions. But without further ado, Joanne.
Hi, guys. Okay, so my name is Joan Obra, and I am the 2nd generation of Rusty's Hawaiian, which is a vertically integrated coffee farm, mill, and roastery in the Ka'u district of the Big Island of Hawaii. So we are located along the southern central coast of the Big Island. Many of you have probably heard of Kona coffee, and that's on the west coast of our island. So Kona and Ka'u are 2 of a total of 8 growing regions throughout our islands here. But I would say that my district, Ka'u, is the one that best actually fits the ICIC program. So we're not an inner city. If you came to visit me, you'd know that we're in the middle of a stretch of highway, about 70 miles with no stoplights. That's how remote it is over here. But this area was economically gutted when the sugar industry left Ka'u in 1996. It was a plantation economy, right? And so it was the major employer here. And in that year, as the sugar mill moved all of its equipment out of the town of Kahala, where I live, the residents lined either side of that main street leading to the highway, and they were just sobbing, just crying and crying, watching all the equipment move out of here, because they knew that the failure of this plantation economy was going to cause local unemployment to spike immediately, which is exactly what happened. And the closest cities to find work are an hour away in Hilo or 2 hours away in Kona. So these former mill workers asked the federal government for help, and they received a large grant to turn the abandoned sugar plantations into small family-run coffee farms. So by the time my parents visited from New Jersey in 1998, one of my dad's childhood friends from the Philippines, who had been a former sugar mill worker, had started a coffee farm. So he took my parents up the slope of the Mauna Loa Mountain, and they were standing in the field, and he started talking about soil and trees and all the things that farmers talk about. And my parents, without saying a single word to each other, they just locked eyes, and they knew that they were going to grow Ka'u coffee. Now, when they came home to New Jersey, where we lived, to tell my brother and I this news, we thought they were absolutely nuts, right? My dad was a chemist. My mom was a medical technologist. So they both always worked in laboratories. My dad had done, he had done some picking of rice at the rice paddies in the Philippines when he was still there before he'd emigrated to the United States. But they didn't have agriculture degrees. They knew nothing about coffee farming. And to be honest, guys, they didn't even drink coffee. They were green tea drinkers. But they had stood on this mountain and totally fallen in love with the romance of it. And they were undaunted. So next thing I knew, dad took an early retirement offer from his job as a chemist, and my mom left her job as a medical technologist, and they ended up in this tiny little town planting coffee. So, they thought, how hard can this be, right? I mean, my dad had narrowly escaped the Marcos dictatorship in the Philippines when the United States had come calling with a green card. And he'd landed in New Jersey with $35 in his pocket, no job, and his first bed in the United States was somebody else's discarded mattress at the side of the road. After having gone through that and finding success as a chemist, he thought, you know, this can't be that hard. But listen, all of us are business owners in here, right? So we all know how hard it is to launch a business. And then in addition, they decided not just to launch a business, but to actually grow a crop that had no market. They started growing this coffee and everybody said, oh, I like that Kona coffee. You guys have Kona coffee? And they're like, no, we're in Ka'u. And they're like, oh, I don't know that Ka'u stuff. Can you get some Kona coffee? So it was really, really difficult. But my dad, you know, he was just as fearless as ever. And one of the themes that has been really prevalent in this conference that I've been happy to hear is that whole concept of leaning hard into your community. And so that's exactly what the Ka'u farmers here did. My parents launched the first coffee cooperative here. They worked with local, state, and federal government agencies to gain all sorts of technical and business training. Farmers wanted to give up because it was too hard. My dad was always telling them, you got to hang in there, hang in there. He was always telling them that, you know, one day soon, Ka'u coffee is going to be as famous as Kona coffee. But then my dad died of lung cancer. His dream had not yet been fulfilled. The Ka'u coffee industry lost one of its bigger cheerleaders, and our immediate family faced a crisis. My brother was still in New Jersey. I was in California with my husband. We were working as journalists at the time. And my mother was here by herself to run a farm, a mill, and a roastery. And she was doing most of the manual labor herself as well. So we faced this really big crisis of, do we continue my father's dream of trying to make Ka'u coffee famous, mom sell the rights to the farm and just give up and move back to the US mainland? So my mom was the one who made the decision to continue the business because over time, that farm, mill, and roastery had really turned into a third sibling. So it wasn't just a business. It was more of like a sibling to my brother and I. And it was the one thing that got her out of bed in the morning with all of her grief at losing my father. So she started talking to a number of roasters in the specialty coffee industry. And she became known as the little engine that could. So for Tim and Jesse, some of the names you might know, we're good friends with Klatch PTs. We've sold coffee to George Howell in Massachusetts. So yeah, you're nodding. You guys know who these folks are. And so basically, and it was in all this networking, my mom would say, I know I can make good coffee, but I just need to know what the industry wants. And so she started to learn all of the stuff. She gained a reputation in the coffee, specialty coffee industry as the little engine that could. And then she started winning a string of awards. So she was named Best Coffee Producer in the World in 2010 by the Specialty Coffee Association of Europe. She's won the Hawaii Coffee Association statewide cupping competition, Best Coffee Grown in Hawaii, for 2 years. Back when they had the Coffees of the Year competition put on by the Roasters Guild, she had one of the 10 best coffees in the world in 2012. And we've also supplied beans to 2 national coffee brewing champions. So Pete Licata, when he won the United States Barista Championship in 2011, and then also to Aslı Yaman when she won the Turkish Brewers Cup in 2014. And those 2 went on to take 2nd place and 3rd place in their world competitions, respectively, using our coffee. So at this point, I'm going to start sharing my screen so you guys can see a bit here. Let me figure out where I'm at and share. And let me put this in present mode. Great, here we go. All right, so the first slide here I wanted to show you is exactly where Ka'u is located. So you'll remember I told you that the Ka'u coffee is on the southern central side of the Big Island. And by contrast, Kona coffee is here on the West Coast. These are all the 8 different growing regions in Hawaii. And we can't sell Ka'u coffee labeled as Kona, and they also can't do the same thing. They can't label Kona as Ka'u. There's laws against doing so. But wanted to just give you that look so that you guys can get a sense of what it looks like here. And everything that I told you is pretty much the short version of our story about how Rusty's Hawaiian established in the specialty coffee industry. So you can read more about this issue of Barista Magazine. This is my husband, Ralph. This is obviously me. And this is the longest interview that we've ever granted to a magazine. So it talks about everything from my parents' immigration story, how the Great Recession gutted our industry. You know, we were journalists before this all started, how we came here to join my mother full time. And we're here with Rusty's Hawaiian. We launched a second coffee company. And we also do a lot of community work. So as of this writing, we had helped raise about almost $800,000 to support Hawaii agriculture. And since this has come out, it's now more than $1 million. And I primarily do that as a lead or secondary grant writer with different teams. That's one of the side gigs that I have. And at the end of the presentation, I'll go ahead and drop that link into the Barista Magazine article. So the coffee that we chose for you guys is our Ka'u Classic Medium Roast. And we chose this one because it is very much the classic coffee of Ka'u. So the Typica variety is the variety that's most grown on Hawaii Island, and it is also a washed coffee. So I'm going to walk you through those steps of how we actually make a washed coffee. But it is, if I had to pick a coffee that was emblematic of this region, this would be it. It also scores pretty well in different reviews. This is the latest review from Coffee Review, and you guys can check out coffeereview.com. They do all sorts of reviews. And this is from August 2020, which they were doing an article that was highlighting coffee companies, Black-owned coffee companies. And so, you know, my husband, myself, and my mom were all co-owners in this company, and so that made us eligible. And so we were pleased with the score because I can't remember now, I think it was 2014 that it had also been a 93. So it basically shows consistency over time, which we were pleased about. Uh-oh, how come it's not advancing? Let me see if I can. Let's see if I could try this. Okay. All right, so I'm going to walk you through how we actually make this coffee from tree to cup. So all coffee starts off as flowers on a tree. And the great thing about coffee flowers is that, number one, they smell like jasmine. So when you have a coffee field and it's flowering season and it's filled with all sorts of flowers like this, just if you know what jasmine smells like, you just walk through the fields and it's just breezes of jasmine coming into your nose. Coffee flowers are self-pollinating, interestingly enough. So we welcome bees. We love seeing bees in our field, but they're not necessary for coffee to pollinate. So they'll actually only bloom for a day or two, and then they will die off. After that, it takes about 7 months to go from, on our field and in our climatic conditions, to go from flower to ripe coffee cherry. So this is a look at what unripe coffee cherry looks like. So it starts off as green, and the cherries at this point are still pretty hard. At the point when it's ready to be harvested, what we're looking for with the Typica variety is this full, deep red color that you see here. And it should be deeply colored all the way from tip to tip. So that indicates when the coffee is completely ripe. And that's the ideal situation that you want for your coffee. Because as Jesse said earlier, we're drinking the seed and not the fruit, but the ripeness of the fruit actually impacts the flavor of the seed. So in a washed coffee, what we want to do is take off that red skin. And so when you take off that red skin, you end up with what's known as parchment coffee. And that's what this looks like here. So this is the seed, and it's covered by a thin layer of parchment. And you'll see why on the next slide it's called parchment. But when it first comes out of the coffee fruit, it's really slimy because the fruit itself, it's not solid like an apple. It's more like what we call mucilage. And so for a washed coffee, what we want to do is soak the seeds in water. And basically what that does is it creates a fermentation process. So then when it's completely finished fermenting, when you touch these again, they won't be slimy at all. They're actually going to feel like river pebbles. That's the stage at where we're at now. So what we do at that point is we'll dry the coffee seeds either in a mechanical dryer if it's raining a lot here, or we'll sun dry them if it's not raining a lot here. And then once they're dried to the proper moisture, you will find the bottom spoon here, that's what this looks like. So you can see now that you've got this seed with a very papery skin around it, and we use a machine called a huller to take that papery skin off, and what is left at the is called greens. So that's the top spoon here. And Tim and Jesse are very familiar with this because this is how the coffee arrives at their roastery. This is the unroasted bean that is actually put into the roaster. So at this point, we are almost ready to roast the coffee for you, but not quite. There's one more step that we need to go through, and it is sample roasting and cupping. So basically what we're doing is taking a small amount of this coffee, right? And we're putting it in these cups, these ceramic cups like this, and filling it with water. And we use a method that's called the Q grader method. And so my husband was a certified Q grader, and he actually has to get his recertification done, but he can't do it now because COVID, right? So he's waiting. But basically the Q grader certification is a process that takes about a week, and you've got to pass more than 20 sensory tests in order to become certified. And basically, it is taught to people from all over the world so that when folks are doing coffee competitions and they're judging coffee competitions, they all speaking the same language, as it were. So some of the things that we look for when we are doing cupping are we're judging a coffee by its aroma, its body, its acidity, the intensity of all of these things. We also look at sweetness. And if the coffee meets, if the sample meets to our satisfaction, then we go ahead and roast it for you. It's so weird. Sorry, guys, I don't know why it keeps doing this thing. Anyway. Uh-oh. I hope my computer's not arguing with me. There we go. Okay. That's what it looks like in a roaster. And here we are. Sis said this was a tree to cup presentation, and one of the questions Marini asked us was, how do you prefer to brew your coffee? So I'm going to introduce you to my brother. This is my little brother, Rusty Obra, and he is the 2015 US AeroPress champion. So my brother's a national coffee brewing champion himself. So this is a video, a tutorial video that he did with his AeroPress method on AeroPress's Instagram. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat so you can see him walk you through step by step how to make coffee with his recipe using an AeroPress. And that's pretty much it. I'll also drop a link to Rusty's in the chat. So if you guys want to check out our different coffees or want to hit me up with questions about coffee growing, Tim, you want to talk more about anaerobics, this is the place to be. We have a contact page on there, and that's really the quickest way to get a hold of us through our entire team. And let's see, Alejandro, how are we on time?
Well, we did start late. I think at this point, if there are questions from participants who want to dive a little bit further, this has been great to hear and to learn more about coffee.
Let me stop sharing my screen. There we go.
Do any of the participants that are listening in have
and I will dig up those links.
Yeah, and we'll share links as well. Let's see.
I have one question for all the coffee makers. When you guys are doing your coffee, are you sampling each other coffees to make sure that you're where you want to be at?
I sample other people's coffees probably about twice a month. I'll buy a bag from somewhere that piques my interest in the country. One like I talked about, you know, somebody else may be roasting the coffee a totally different way. We're on a totally different machine and pulling out different notes that I might not have thought of, you know, or like have a profile that's just completely different. But also because if you're only drinking your own product, then you get stuck in what you're doing, and it's completely inspiring to see what other people are doing. So I think some coffee people can get a little catty. I see it as we can all be friends. Not everybody sees it that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, same. I think I just love coffee in general, so I'm constantly drinking coffee. So if I'm not at home, especially when I'm not at home, I try, you know, whatever coffee's out there. I mean, I mean, when I'm on the road, sometimes I'll even drink some, you know, gas station coffee, and there's been times where I've been surprised with some really great coffee. Other times, not so much. But yeah, I particularly one thing that I do like to do is if with whatever city I'm in or any place that I'm outside of Chicago, I like to go look for you know, small coffee shops and roasters particularly because I want to try what they're having and just, you know, and even we'll promote them in our page. You know, if we're sampling a coffee of theirs and we really like it, you know, we'll tell people from that city, like if you're in the city, come check them out. You know, like Tim said, you know, we're one big community, and you know, and we like to support each other, and you know, you're right, there are some folks who can be a little catty or even, you know, not as friendly, but for the most part, you know, we started from the bottom, so we know where that is and what that feels like, and we like to support as much as possible.
Yeah, I think it's different for us as coffee producers. Everybody wants to talk to a coffee farmer. We don't get so much of the cattiness because everyone's just so excited to talk to someone about the methods in the farm. And also, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we have 2 coffee companies. So the Rusty's Hawaiian is really our single estate. So the 3 of us are really considered roasters here. But we also sell a lot of unroasted coffee, either produced by us, I mean, less produced by us because our farm is smaller, but we're buyers and sellers of other folks' coffee. So for example, if someone says, man, I'd love to buy a container of Rusty's Hawaiian, I'll say, oh, no, my farm's not big enough to give you a container, but I can work with a bunch of other farmers to put together a container for you. And in that case, all the cupping from the slides that I showed you, that becomes really key. We're always having to cup other people's coffee to make sure that the entire batch works well. But the other thing is we also sell a lot of coffee to Asia. We sell some to Europe. And so we travel a lot and we're always visiting coffee shops there so that we understand what they want on the ground. So I'll give you a really good example. Taiwan, if anyone's ever been to Taiwan, you'll know how much they love stinky tofu, right? So when my husband went, he's like, oh man, it smells just like, you know, a baby's bottom after they pooped. It lives up to the hype. But because they really like that intense flavor to their cuisine, they like intensely flavored coffees. So you guys know the natural coffees, the coffees that are dried whole, you know, like a cherry, they can be very intense and sometimes almost on the edge of ferment, where a roaster in the United States might say, oh, that's way too fermenty. Someone in Taiwan might say, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So there's all these regional differences throughout the world. And so you have to be constantly tasting as a coffee producer or someone selling green coffee to know what your client wants.
Yeah. And somebody like me would work with a broker that Joan would sell that container of coffee to. And I would try a sample from most of those lots in that container. Yeah. And I might only buy 12 bags from one lot that I really like. Those other 11, I'll just toss out the window. But I still have to taste them all and taste them all without knowing which one is which in order to pick out what coffee is best for our profiles.
Right.
We had a great question in the chat from Ainara from Buenos Aires Cafe. Do you all find it difficult to start packaging and labeling your product for consumer consumption?
Yeah, if I may, I think for us, for a couple of reasons. One is because we didn't know anybody that was doing this prior, so we really had to do everything from scratch. Mm-hmm. 2, our packaging is fully compostable, so so that was hard as well, finding a good package. Also, even, you know, stickers. You know, you think stickers can be so different. You know, we had to find stickers that use soy inks and that are paper-based and that they don't use any wax coating on it. And we also wanted something that lasts, you know. So that was one of the issues for us. So it was difficult, but it's not impossible. If you send me or any of us, I'm sure, an email, we can definitely direct you into where to look at. But particularly, I would look for something local if possible.
Yeah, I mean, I know for us, my wife who owns the company, has a little bit over a decade in market research and product development. So she helped do packaging research for brands like Coke and Kraft and other things. So we had a few tricks up our sleeve when we started, just to make a package that was not only made by hand, but was attentive to the consumer, and would catch their eye if it was on a shelf or sitting somewhere else that wasn't with us to sell it. And actually, you know, like these bags you see are actually headed out the window because they don't fit our sustainability plan. So we're actually switching to tin because it's one of the most easily recyclable things. We compost 96% of our waste here. I make one kitchen trash bag of trash here a week. And so it felt really bad to be putting our bags in landfills. So we're heading away from that. But unfortunately, the compostable packaging didn't work for us because we compost everything here in our own facility that we made. And the bags just take too long to break down. So for us, we had to make a switch. And for our switch, it's to aluminum, which is a little bit more sustainable for the way we model things. So yeah, that's us.
Yeah, I'm interested in getting your guys' bag suppliers. We use Savor Brands, and so they do a lot of coffee bags for folks in Europe and in the United States, and they're based here in Hawaii. Well, they also own their own factory in China, so we're able to get really customized small runs of things, which is terrific. And I know that they were working on a line of sustainable packaging, but then COVID hit, and then I don't really know what happened since then, because they couldn't even ship things in and out of China for a really long time. And I haven't had to order new bags recently, so I haven't checked in with them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard when you're first starting to find packaging that both can keep your costs at a reasonable place and still look like a professional product. I know for us, for a long time, what I did was I bought a really nice color laser printer. I bought it like a photo quality laser printer. And that allowed us to print out labels on sheets. There's sites online where you can get a regular piece of paper cut into any kind of label shape you think of, whether it's 10 on a sheet or 2. And so once we figured out that we can create our own labeling and print it in a way that's professional and also sustainable for us, that helped a lot in the beginning. But yeah, it gets tricky. It gets tricky. A lot of eBay when I first started. I remember buying cases of like 100 or 150 bags at a time.
Yeah.
Before I knew where to find suppliers, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people probably start off with the stock bags from.
Yeah.
Right, and then put stickers on them, and then after that they'll move on to custom printed bags.
Totally. So, put down, you spend a little bit of money on design, you get your packaging.
Right. Yeah. So as far as the logistics go of starting a package and label product, I don't think they're that hard. And you know, it's fairly easy to find out the rules for labeling as well. I mean, there's FDA rules and then there's state rules. So
yeah, start with your local health inspector. They're your friend, not a challenger. They want to work with you. And then from there, they'll tell you about, you know, what their requirements are versus who to talk to at the state, right? Or even the federal FDA, if you really want to go that far, for the EPA, depending on what size you are.
Well, thank you again so much to all of our presenters today, and for those who participated. We hope that you've enjoyed the last 3 days, or 3 days of the national conference. If there are any other questions, please feel free to reach out to our presenters. But with that, I wish you a good evening and rest of your day.